The boy pulled the arm of a man who was leaving the cemetery, but when the man looked back, he burst into tears. Luis Otavio was a 42-year-old man with no children. He was married to Cristina, with whom he was very happy. But, unfortunately, Cristina couldn't have children. However, this didn't make the couple sad, as they had each other and enjoyed life this way. However, Cristina was very sad because she knew that her husband's dream had always been to have a child. Even so, the couple didn't adopt any. They preferred to financially help several charitable institutions that supported needy children. Luis Otavio's story begins when he was abandoned by his biological mother when he was just a little boy. Mother and son went through many difficulties, and his mother was abandoned by her husband, who ran away with another woman and took all his wife's savings with him. Because of this, Luis Otavio's mother became very sad and bitter about life, and she ended up becoming a terrible mother. Her money was scarce, and she could hardly find work because she had a small child, which frustrated her a lot. So, one day, she took Luis Otavio for a walk and said they would eat pizza. The boy was very happy because it had been a long time since his mother had treated him so well. He was only 6 years old and was a very clever little boy who loved his mother despite all the problems. During the outing, Luis Otavio didn't let go of his mother's hand. Then, she arrived at a huge house with a large garden and told him, "Son, please wait sitting here on this bench because mommy forgot the money at home, but I'll be right back." Luis Otavio was very obedient. He sat there waiting for his mother. Hours passed, and the boy began to find his mother's delay strange. Then, it started to get cloudy, and light raindrops began to fall. Thus, one of the doors of the large mansion opened, and a nun came out toward the boy. "My good boy, what are you doing standing here? It's starting to rain. Where is your mother?" Luis Otavio remained silent, but the nun then realized that his mother had left him there on purpose. Next to him, there was a little suitcase with some things. So, the nun took the boy by the hand, his little things, and led him inside the place. When Luis Otavio entered, he saw several children there. Thus, being very clever, he knew right away that it was an orphanage and that his mother would never come back. Several months passed. Luis Otavio was a very withdrawn little boy and didn't make friends until another boy his age was taken there by the nuns. His name was Gustavo. He was very shy, and the other boys played mean tricks on him. One day, Luis Otavio saw that the jokes were getting too serious and heavy. So, he decided to intervene. Thus, Luis Otavio and Gustavo got into a fight with the older boys, but they did well. However, they were all taken to the principal's office, who scolded them all for their bad behavior. The principal's name was Sister Isabel. She was older in the orphanage and knew how to deal well with young people. She found it strange that Luis Otavio defended someone. Then, she knew that he would finally make a friend. But even so, they were punished for their bad behavior. Luis Otavio and Gustavo were in charge of helping clean the classrooms for 30 days, and the other boys were in charge of cleaning the outside of the orphanage. This time together made Luis Otavio and Gustavo become inseparable friends. One time, all the children from the orphanage were going on an excursion. They would visit a beautiful farm with a river. For the children, it would be wonderful. The trip to the place was very calm and fun. When they arrived at the farm, the young people had a lot of fun. However, there was an important detail as a rule. No one should go to the forbidden area of the stream, which was very far from where everyone was. But even so, Sister Jezebel put other nuns on duty at the site because she knew how the young people were. However, a group of 5 boys, including Gustavo and Luis Otavio, agreed to go to the place just to see what it was like. This part of the river, after bypassing the nun security, they arrived at the place and saw that the waters didn't seem dangerous. But even so, they didn't risk it. However, Gustavo saw something shining on the other side of the river and decided to go there. But Luis Otavio knew that Gustavo didn't swim well. So, he decided to go with his friend. But as the two crossed, a current began to get stronger. Luis held his friend's hand, but he wasn't strong enough. So, the current took Gustavo away. One of the nuns appeared and managed to get Luis out of the water as quickly as possible. He woke up in a hospital 2 days later. Sister Isabel was by his side. He asked about Gustavo, but the nuns said they couldn't find the boy. Searches continued for days, but Gustavo was not found. So, the wake was made for him. Luis Otavio didn't feel well at all because Gustavo was his only friend. Then, time passed, and Luis was already 18 years old. but he never forgot his friend. However, he moved on. He was never adopted by anyone and, besides being abandoned by his father and then by his mother, he lost his best friend. He wasn't lucky even in the jobs he got. Luis Otavio shared a small apartment with his orphanage friend called Kleber. The two of them weren't the best friends in the world, but they helped each other a lot. Kleber saw the difficulty his friend had in keeping jobs. So, he got a job at the diner where he worked. Kleber noticed that Luis didn't smile at the customers and was very cold with them. So, Kleber advised him to just smile, even if it was a fake smile, and that would show joy to the customers and his boss. So, he decided to try it. Thus, he started to receive more tips and became permanent in a job. Once, when he was going to work, it was raining heavily, and a car passed by with all speed over a puddle and soaked Luis completely. But he didn't mind. However, the car stopped a little ahead and opened the door. A beautiful young woman apologized to him and asked him to get in, that she would give him a ride. Her name was Cristina. Luis Otavio was enchanted by the young lady's politeness and by her showing that she cared. So, she took him to his work, and she apologized once again. When the rain passed a little later, at lunchtime, while Luis Otavio was serving the tables, Cristina appeared to have lunch there. He was surprised to see her again. Cristina brought him a present. He couldn't believe it. She didn't know him, but she felt guilty for what happened earlier. It was a beautiful pair of pants and a new shirt as an apology. He felt embarrassed to accept it, but he couldn't be rude to her. Shortly after that, the girl left, and at home, he tried on the clothes, and they fit perfectly. He went to bed very happy with this event and wondered if he would ever see her again. A few days later, Cristina appeared again at the diner, much to Luis Otavio's surprise. However, Cristina made a somewhat unusual invitation. She invited him to her birthday party, which would be in a few days. He was even more surprised, but he accepted the invitation. To her happiness, they exchanged phone numbers, and Cristina left the diner very happy. Apparently, she was liking him. The two young people exchanged messages and got to know each other better before Cristina's birthday. They arranged to meet, and it was simply the best thing that had ever happened in Luis's life. The days passed quickly, and he went to Cristina's birthday party, as promised. He simply loved her party and the birthday girl. Cristina's friends loved Luis Otavio. So, the young people had other meetings. Until one day, Luis asked Cristina to be his girlfriend, and she, very happy, said yes. Time passed quickly, and they couldn't believe how happy they were. They both graduated, and after graduation, after 3 years, they decided to get married. Some nuns from the orphanage where Luis Otavio grew up went to his wedding, including Sister Jezebel, who was very happy for the boy who was now a grown man. For many years, the couple was happy. But, unfortunately, Cristina couldn't have children, and that frustrated her a lot. However, Luis didn't care about that since he helped the orphanage where he grew up and other charity institutions for young people. However, unfortunately, not everything is rosy. The couple's happiness was interrupted by terrible news. Cristina, after some routine exams, was returning home, and a truck on the road lost control, throwing Cristina's car against a tree. Cristina was taken to an emergency, and Luis was notified. But when he arrived at the hospital, he was informed that, unfortunately, his wife was in a coma and very injured. It was a very difficult time for that man. He had his period of sadness in life, but a lot of happiness alongside his wife. He wasn't prepared to be left again. He was 34 years old. And one day, as he often did, Luis Otavio was visiting his grandmother's grave, who had died when he still lived with his mother. When he was leaving the cemetery, a little boy went up to him and pulled the sleeve of his shirt. He asked for some change to eat something with his father. As soon as Luis turned and saw the boy, he was startled by what he saw. The boy looked a lot like Gustavo, his best friend who had died in childhood. For Luis, that was scary, but he calmed down and thought rationally that it could be just a boy who looked a lot like Gustavo. "What's your name, little boy?" Luis Otavio asked. And the boy replied, "My name is Gustavo, sir." Luis wondered if it would be possible that his friend had survived because his body was never found. Maybe he was found by someone who took care of him. So, Luis asked the boy's father's name, and the boy replied that it was Eduardo and that he was just needing help because he was very sick. He didn't have money for the medicines. Then, the little one started to cry. So, Luis said he would help him and his father because he had nothing to lose by helping someone. So, he took off his head that his friend might still be alive and went to the boy's house with him. When he arrived at the scene, an ambulance was taking Gustavo's father away, and Luis was sure that the boy was not his friend's son. However, witnessing this scene, the boy became desperate and cried a lot, breaking Luis's heart. He committed to going to the hospital to check on the boy's father. For this, a neighbor of the little boy volunteered to stay and take care of him. So, Luis went to the hospital, and when he got there, he waited for news, until the doctor came out and called him to talk. The news was not pleasant because the boy's father had passed away. He was already in a terminal state and couldn't resist. Luis Otavio was stunned by the news. He didn't know what to do. At that moment, since Luis was already at the hospital, he inquired about his wife's condition, but they replied that it remained the same and that only a miracle could save her. After a few minutes, a nurse came to talk to him to see if he was a friend or close relative of Eduardo's in order to take responsibility for the wake and all the protocols. Luis knew that it wasn't his obligation, but he couldn't just turn a blind eye to the situation. So, he said he would take care of everything. On the way to the boy's house, Luis was in great pain. He prayed to God that he wouldn't have to hold a wake for his beloved wife. He talked to God, saying that it wasn't fair for him to lose another person he deeply loved. He begged God not to do this to him and to allow her to come back to life. Luis felt a great relief in his chest. He returned home, where the little boy was, and the young boy asked about his father, how he was, and if he would come back home. Luis was taken aback, but he remembered when he was young and was abandoned by everyone, as well as losing his best friend in that way. So, he decided to tell the truth to the boy. "Young man, did you know that your father was very ill, right? He fought against that health problem for many years. It wasn't, he was too tired, so he fell asleep and will rest for a long time," said Luis Otavio. The young boy then said, "So, he died? Right? I know he did. Now I'm alone without him. I'm going to end up living on the streets. I have no one else in my life." So, Luis said it wouldn't be like that because he would take care of him from now on. But the little boy said it wasn't his obligation and went to the room to be alone. The elderly woman who was taking care of him then said she didn't know how she would take care of a little boy because she was already very old and didn't have the financial means to do so. Luis Otavio said he would do his best to ensure the boy was well raised, young Gustavo. So, he bid farewell to his father and cried a lot, staying by the coffin. Sister Jezebel Freire's sister, director of the orphanage, told Luis Otavio that he would have a good life there until someone adopted him. However, she asked why he didn't adopt the boy himself. She was startled by his resemblance to the boy who had died years ago, which was incredible to her. Sister Jezebel said he was a gift from God to Luis and that he shouldn't waste this chance. He asked if it would be possible for him to do that, and she replied yes, because he had excellent financial conditions, and besides, she would pull some strings to help him with that, and he could already keep the boy in his house for the time being. After the funeral, Luis took Gustavo to the hospital to meet his wife, who was in a coma and who, God willing, would be the boy's future mother. When they arrived there, he introduced the wife to the boy, and even though she was in a deep sleep, Gustavo introduced himself with great humility. It hurt a lot to see his wife in that situation. So, Luis called Gustavo to go home. Luis kissed his wife's forehead, and when they were about to leave the room, Gustavo looked back and saw Christina's foot move, and he said it very excitedly. "Her foot moved. I'm sure it moved." Luis was scared, started screaming for nurses and doctors. When they arrived at the young woman's room, not even the doctors could believe what was happening because they were close to giving up on the young woman. Everyone in the room thought the boy was delusional until suddenly they saw movement in Christina's feet and hands. Luis started crying with happiness and thanking God for allowing his beloved wife to come back to life to help take care of little Gustavo. After 35 minutes, the young woman opened her eyes, and the first person she saw was her wonderful husband by her bedside. Christina says she managed to hear the whole conversation, immediately asked about Gustavo. Luis told her he was in the hallway, but first, he told her everything that had happened to the little boy. Then, he called Gustavo, and Christina smiled at him, hugged him tightly, and Gustavo was very happy with that. After a few days, they were all home together. At first, Gustavo felt quite strange, missed his father a lot, but over time, he got used to it and overcame the loss of his loved one. Over time, Luis had a problem with Gustavo's adoption because in the boy's documents, his father was not the one who had died, but another man, as the social worker and lawyer said, because the boy's real father was in prison due to an offense. So, Sister Jezebel said that adoption would be possible because even with the boy's father alive, he was in prison and requested rights over his son. However, Luis was pensive. Gustavo's father was not the man who died, and the real one was alive. Who would be his father then? Sister Jezebel was surprised to see the boy's documents because his father's name was also Gustavo. The two were startled because it would be possible for Gustavo, Luis Otavio's childhood friend, to have survived. She got the address of the prison where he was, and the two of them would go there. But first, Luis wanted to tell his wife and talk to young Gustavo. When he got home, he explained to Cristina and then called Gustavo for a conversation they had never had before. "Young man, was that man who took care of you your father?" Luis asked, and Gustavo replied, "Yes, I considered him my father because my real father was arrested. My real father's name is Gustavo, and the man who took care of me was Eduardo. They worked together in a shop, but the shop owner accused my father of taking some things from the shop, and this made him be arrested. So, Eduardo took care of me for years, and I called him father. My real father is in prison, and I didn't know what to do to get him out. He's innocent. They accused him of something he didn't even do." Luis was surprised by that. Could it be the same Gustavo? So, he left the young boy with his wife only while he would visit his true father in prison, accompanied by Sister Isabel. They arrived at the location on visiting day with a lawyer to collect all possible information. So, 30 years later, a great reunion might be about to happen. They went to the visitation room and waited. When a man with his head down came and he looked into Luis Otavio's eyes, they couldn't believe what they saw because it was Gustavo, Luis's childhood friend and father of young Gustavo, right in front of them and very much alive. A silence was interrupted when Luis got up and hugged his friend, who returned strongly. They talked for a long time, and Luis said he had custody of his son. It seemed that life had pulled the strings for them to meet again. Sister Jezebel hugged Gustavo, asking forgiveness for what had happened, and asked him to explain how all this was possible. So, Gustavo told that on the day they were at the river trying to cross, he was carried away by the current. A woman found him floating in the river waters, 17 kilometers away from where he was. She was a simple woman, a clothes washer, and her husband, a simple bricklayer. So, the two, who had no children, decided to take care of the little boy, but he had lost his memory because he hit his head somewhere in the river. Time passed, and he grew up under the care of the elderly couple, who didn't have good financial conditions, but gave him a lot of love and affection. They called him Paolo until one day his memory returned normally. Gustavo was already 20 years old, and his adoptive parents had died. He even tried to return to the orphanage to ask Sister Jezebel for help, but he felt ashamed to do so and decided to go on with his life away from everyone. Gustavo had married and had a son whom his wife called Gustavo Jr. His wife had died over time in a bus accident. He took care of his baby son alone until a friend named Eduardo got him a job as a janitor in a men's clothing store. It wasn't the best job in the world, but it helped a lot, and he was grateful to his friend for that. However, one of the store owners, Mr. Raul, was arrogant, presumptuous, always humiliating Gustavo, who had to swallow it because he needed the money to take care of his son. Over the years, the store began to have financial problems, and one of the partners thought he was being robbed by an employee, and the other partner, Raul, said he suspected that Gustavo was taking pieces from the store and selling them, besides taking money hidden from the store's cash register. One day, the police arrived at the scene. Everyone was scared because Raul made a report and accused Gustavo of theft. The police searched his things and found the money and merchandise from the store with him, so the police took him away. Gustavo was arrested, tried, and convicted, but his friend Eduardo knew of Gustavo's innocence, but Gustavo wanted him to just take care of his son. Because if no one took care of him, he would go to the orphanage, and Gustavo didn't want that for his son. Time passed, and there was Gustavo and Luis Otavio together again. Not in a way they wanted, but together again. Luis vowed to get his friend out of there, prove his innocence. He hired detectives, lawyers, and got a witness who at the time saw what Raul did, but was afraid to testify in favor of Gustavo because he had a wife and children and couldn't afford to be unemployed. Raul was tried and convicted of several crimes, and Gustavo was finally released. The man was tired of everything. but he wanted to see his son again. He was eternally grateful to his best friend Luis Otavio, who didn't give up on him and helped his son, besides giving him his freedom. The two friends had a good life. Gustavo managed to finish his studies even at his advanced age and tried college. He graduated in medicine to set an example for his son. One night, Luis was lying in bed with his wife and reflecting on everything that had happened in the last few times. He was sad, but he was happy that everything had worked out in the end. Before going to sleep, Cristina revealed something shocking to Luis. She told him that she was pregnant and that soon they would have a little girl running around the house. Luis couldn't contain his joy. He jumped out of bed and cried tears of happiness. 1 year and 8 months passed, and Luis and Cristina were in a beautiful garden, having a picnic together with their little girl, named Julia. In addition, the two friends finally had the happy life that had been taken away from them over time. Friends, we've come to the end of this beautiful and emotional story. I hope you enjoyed it. Comment below your opinion and don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share the video with your friends and family. See you soon with more stories like this. A big hug and God bless you.